But the people of Kalba stopped listening, until the river spoke again. It began with a girl named Arya, a quiet 16-year-old whose mother swore she was special, born during a storm under a moon that refused to shine. One night, Arya heard her name being called from the riverside, in a voice that wasn't human. Arya didn't run. Her feet moved before she understood why. The voice wasn't calling her name anymore. It was speaking a prophecy. Before the third moon rises, the village will drown in the sins it forgot. She stood frozen. The river had never spoken in her lifetime, not out loud. The next morning she warned the elders. They laughed. They called her young, naive, too imaginative. But when the river turned red the next day, not with blood but with clay washed down from the mountains, the laughter stopped. One elder trembled as he whispered, just like it did 50 years ago. That night Arya returned to the river. This time she was not alone. Her mother held her hand tightly. Her voice shook. I never told you what the river whispered the night you were born. It spoke of a child who would return what the village had stolen. What did we steal? Arya whispered. Her mother's eyes flooded with guilt. Life. We stole life. The truth came in like floodwater. Long before Arya was born, Kalba village had once offered children to the river, in exchange for fertile land and full harvests. Until they stopped. Until they forgot. The river hadn't. And the prophecy was clear. The river will reclaim its debt. Then what do we do? Arya cried. Her mother turned toward the water. You must be the bridge between us and the river's anger. The river trembled beneath the moon. And the water rose. Daniel did not sleep that night. He lay awake in the darkness, hearing the river's whispers echo in his ears. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of the old man drowning, the girl with the mark, and the burning village that had not yet burned. He could feel the prophecy crawling up his spine like a cold hand. Yet at dawn, for reasons he couldn't explain, he returned to the riverbank. He wasn't alone. A young woman stood by the water, staring into the mist as if listening. Her eyes were wide, not with fear but recognition, as though she already knew the river's secrets. Before Daniel could speak, she turned and whispered. You heard it too, didn't you? He nodded, unsure of his voice. The girl stepped closer. My name is Sarah. I think we're meant to stop what's coming. Her words trembled, not from fear but destiny. Daniel suddenly felt a pull stronger than dread. A calling. What did the river say to you? He asked. Sarah looked away, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. Said, I will bury my own children. The wind seemed to hold its breath. Daniel felt the weight of something ancient and terrifying settle over them. He realized this wasn't fate for one person, but for everyone in that village. And the river wasn't done talking. Behind them, the waters began to churn. A shadow formed beneath the surface. Not a person, not an animal. Something older. Something watching. Daniel took Sarah's hand as the river whispered again, louder than ever. The price of silence has come due. And this time they both heard the screams. His screams didn't come from the river. They came from the village. Daniel and Sarah ran, breathless, stumbling through the tall grass toward the sound of terror. The closer they got, the more the air felt heavy, as though every step dragged against something unseen. When they arrived, what they saw was worse than a nightmare. The villagers were gathered in a circle around a woman, her body floating in midair, eyes wide, her limbs twisted in a way no living persons could bend. But she wasn't dead. She was talking. And the voice that came out of her wasn't hers. The river remembers, it hissed. Your ancestors made a promise. Daniel whispered, what promise? But the woman, or whatever was inside her, laughed. The river gave life. The people gave death. Sarah gasped. This is about the sacrifices, the old rituals they abandoned. The voice snarled, you broke the pact. And now the river will take back what was stolen. Suddenly the woman fell to the ground, lifeless. A baby began crying. The wind changed direction. And the river roared from miles away. Sarah turned to Daniel, her voice shaking. We're not meant to save them. We're meant to stop us from becoming them. Daniel looked back toward the river, a place that once gave water, now delivering death. The prophecy was clear. If the living won't return what is owed, the river will collect the living. The ground trembled beneath their feet. And Daniel finally understood. The river wasn't whispering anymore. It was calling. The village that ignored the river's voice would drown in its silence. Please follow me for no reason. Just when the village thought the curse had been lifted, something happened that proved they were wrong all along. Daniel couldn't sleep. The voice of the river still echoed in his mind, like waves trapped in a shell. He felt watched. But not by anything human. Then he heard it. Water. Not from the river outside but inside the house. Daniel looked down and froze. The floor was wet. A trail of water moved slowly across the room, like it was alive. Before he could move, a voice whispered. But the voice wasn't human. A restored shrine cannot bury a broken truth. Daniel turned and saw her. A woman made of water stood at the corner of the room. Her skin shimmered like a flowing river. Her eyes were as deep as the sea. She didn't walk. She floated. And then vanished. Outside, screams broke the silence. Daniel ran into the street, and saw something impossible. The river was rising. But not like a flood. It was walking. The water crawled into houses. It passed under doors. Women cried. Children screamed. The river was not angry. The river was owed. Daniel understood. It was never about the shrine. It was about a confession. A buried sin the elders swore to take to their graves. Tonight, the river came to collect. He stood alone at the riverbank as the moon cast its silver glow over the waters. James listened not with fear but with acceptance. The river had shown him the past, the future, and the price of silence. And now it demanded one final sacrifice, not of blood but of truth. He closed his eyes and let the river speak through him, his voice trembling as he revealed the forgotten prophecy. A curse birthed from betrayal, a village blinded by fear, and a truth buried beneath generations of lies. And with each word he spoke, the wind seemed to carry the river's voice further, toward the sleeping village. By dawn they would all know. The river's prophecy was not meant to punish, but to awaken. Whether the village embraced its truth or drowned in ignorance would be left to the living. James had done what many before him refused to do. He listened, and he spoke. And as he stepped away from the water, a shadow rose in the mist, not to threaten but to watch. The river kept its secrets, but it also remembered its guardians. James was now one of them. By the next morning, strange things began to unfold in the village. The elders woke up screaming, their dreams filled with visions of the river turning black and swallowing the town whole. Mothers found their children speaking aloud in their sleep, reciting ancient words they had never been taught. And deep within the town square, cracks began to form in the earth, as if something beneath it wanted to rise. James walked through the village and nobody met his eyes. They knew he had spoken, they just didn't know if he had spoken truth or doom. No. The village was afraid of him. A stranger who listened to the river. A man who heard what others ignored. That night a meeting was called at the village square. The chief rose and spoke of tradition, of honor, of silence. But James stood before him and told them the cost of silence was death. The village had broken its promise, and the river had come to collect. With heavy hearts and trembling hands, the people finally understood. The curse wasn't coming. It was already here. And the river, once a peaceful guide, was becoming a mirror, reflecting the soul of the village back at them. Only one question remained. Would they face the truth or drown in it? The river rose higher with each passing hour, like a beast slowly waking from a centuries-long slumber. The villagers gathered at its banks, panic in their eyes, confusion in their hearts. The water had never behaved like this before, not even in the fiercest rainy seasons. The elders begged the river for forgiveness, but the water only churned and twisted, reflecting back the faces of those who stood before it. Not as they were, but as they could have been. Greed, lies, cowardice. Every vice was revealed in the shimmering surface. For years they had ignored the promise their forefathers made. A promise sealed not by ink but by blood. James stood alone by the river's edge. His heart broke not for what the village had done, but for what it had become, a place that had forgotten its soul. He stepped forward, placing his palm against the rising water. Just then the river whispered, not in sound but in understanding. The truth had always been simple. To break a promise was to break oneself. James closed his eyes and made a decision. If the village could not restore the promise, then he would bear the consequence. He stepped into the water, deeper until it reached his waist. The villagers screamed, but he didn't turn back. The river began to calm. The tide softened. The waters dropped. The storm clouds that had gathered above slowly rolled away. The earth stopped trembling. Sacrifice. That was the balance the river needed. Not in blood but in truth. And as sunrise kissed the river's surface, James was gone. The village was safe. But in every ripple of the water, every breeze that danced through the trees, his voice remained, not as a curse but a reminder. A promise once broken never truly dies. It waits, and it watches. Some say the river still carries his memory, and if you listen closely on quiet nights, you can hear the same voice that once echoed there. It doesn't warn. It teaches. Never forget your promises, or they will remember you. The whispers grew louder not just in the river, but in the hearts of the villagers. Even the strongest among them, elders who once mocked the river's voice, now found their sleep broken by the same haunting murmurs. The end is not coming, it has already begun. And then without warning the river's water turned as dark as midnight. Dead fish floated to the surface. The crops along the bank withered in a single night. And the air grew so cold that children cried in their sleep, not from fear but because they swore they heard something calling their names from beneath the water. Liana stood alone by the river's edge, her lantern shaking in her trembling hands. She suddenly knew, this wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. And she was the only one who had heard the river's final whisper. One more sign, and the village will drown in its own silence. The next morning something strange happened. The river didn't flow. It stood still, frozen like a mirror made of glass, reflecting the sky with a haunting clarity no one had ever seen before. People gathered, whispering among themselves, afraid to touch the water, as if it was alive, watching them. Elder Marin placed his staff on the riverbank, and whispered, "The river is holding its breath. That means it's waiting for something, or someone." Liana stepped forward, remembering the strange voice she heard the night before in her sleep, the one that said, "The river knows who the marked one is." Her heart sank. She knew what it meant. The river wasn't silent for nothing. It was waiting for a sacrifice. And then the earth beneath the river split. A massive stone tablet rose from the depths, covered in carvings no one had seen in centuries. Everyone backed away, except Liana. She looked closer and whispered, "It's choosing someone." The river had spoken. The village gathered at the riverbank once more, this time in silence. The water was unusually still, as if waiting for something, or someone. It had been days since Daniel vanished into its depths, and the elders now feared the prophecy was fulfilled. The chosen one had been taken, and the river no longer whispered. Just as the elders prepared to declare Daniel lost, the water stirred. A ripple. Then another. Suddenly a hand broke the surface, followed by a body, gasping for air, covered in river weeds and carrying something no one had expected. A glowing stone marked with ancient symbols. The villagers fell to their knees, not in fear but reverence. Daniel spoke in a voice that didn't feel like his own. "The river has spoken. The future belongs to those who listen, not to those who fear." The elders trembled as he walked toward them, the stone pulsing with a soft heartbeat-like glow. The prophecy had not taken him. It had transformed him. As the village celebrated his return, Daniel placed the stone into the earth near the riverbank. And suddenly, water began to rise unnaturally from the soil, forming a circle around him like a shield of living prophecy. Then the river whispered again, louder than ever before, "Honor the past or be buried by it." From that day the river was no longer feared, it was worshipped. If you enjoyed this story and want to support more, please follow me, and if you feel led, you can buy me a coffee to encourage the journey. Your support means more than you know. Hot beverage, yellow heart. Please follow me for no reason.